everybody should feel like the patient is at the center, including our healthcare providers, and that's certainly not always the case.
When you're ill, it's really hard to get what you need, even though it's plentiful out there from the science.
Today on the show, we're excited to have on Chuck Piccirillo, founding Zealic Health as its CEO.
Many people say, well, how did you end up in Ukraine, right? It's not a common place for many companies to reach out and do that. I established for my people there what was referred to as Plan B.
LDTs, laboratory-developed tests, have become a topic of hot debate this year since the FDA announced on April 29th that LDTs, which were primarily regulated by CLIA, would now be under the same full regulatory scrutiny as medical devices. So, Chuck, how do you respond to this? What do you make of this? And in your opinion, is the FDA overreacting to safety concerns?
There's nothing out there that doesn't have the word AI on it. If it's IT, the people are slapping AI on it now. It's you got to sort through that before you start asking the AI question. Even
where does marketing end and reality begin?
Welcome to the BioTalk Unzipped podcast, where we unzip the stories behind medical progress by sharing the latest and greatest advances in biopharmaceuticals and medical technologies in a fun, entertaining, and enlightening format. And now your co-hosts, Gregory Austin and Dr. Chad Briscoe. Welcome to BioTalk Unzipped, where our mission is to unzip, unlock, and uncover the stories behind medical progress. I'm your host, Gregory Austin from Kansas City. I'm a life science professional in the quality and regulatory consulting space for ECI. And along with me from North Carolina is my friend and co-host, Dr. Chad Briscoe. Now, actually, Chad is in Kansas City right now for AAPS Summer Scientific Forum. Pretty cool. Chad is a bioanalytical scientific expert with Solarion, and we publish BioTalk Unzipped twice a month and bring experts from different corners of the pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device worlds to share their innovations, insights, career journeys, and personal stories to the show. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on our episodes, and let us know what you'd like to hear about in the future. Today on the show, we are excited to have on Chuck Piccirillo, who works in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, but is coming to us from Poland right now, which is pretty cool.
Yes,
Chuck
it is cool.
Chuck has been leading teams in engineering, R&D, and technology since 1988 and in executive leadership since 2004 for medical imaging, healthcare IT, eClinical SaaS. He was the CTO-CIO for PRA International, a huge CRO. And since in 2016, he got back into his entrepreneurial roots, founding Zealic Health as its CEO. Zealic Health is a highly patient-centric digital platform designed to help commercial healthcare, clinical trials, medical devices, and life science businesses take care of their patients faster, smoother, and with care. Inspired by the word zeal, they named the company to reflect their passion for pragmatic innovation, engineering game-changing solutions that will ultimately contribute positively to improving care and treatment, helping people lead healthier lives. Chuck, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you very much, Greg. I'm thrilled to be here and also thrilled to get the chance to spend some time talking with Chad as well, as we had the pleasure of working together. Well, it's now, 9 years ago? So
it's been quite some time, yeah. It has.
Yeah.
Time flies, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Well, as a warm thank you for joining us, BioTalk Unzipped will make a $100 donation to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, which listeners, you can find a link in the show notes to check that out later. Chuck, tell us more about this foundation and why it's important to you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, thank you for making that donation. It does mean a lot to me personally. And the reason I actually had requested it was when I was a young teenager, I struggled with some illnesses that unfortunately were not easily diagnosed at the time, so a long time ago. And ultimately it was concluded that I had colitis, a chronic illness that I had to live with for, what ended up to be about 35 years until ultimately I was faced with a difficult decision of having major surgery to ultimately have to eliminate my colon. And I'm thankful that, now I don't worry about at least colon cancer, which obviously is a very, very serious illness. many people. Yeah. And what a lot of people don't realize around colitis or IBD is the fact that with the time of having the disease, your risk goes up exponentially, which is why I didn't have cancer. I was thankful, but I did make that decision. And it also ties into the driving factor. That illness is really what has inspired me for now 40 years to be involved in healthcare and life science in so many different ways. And to your point, Greg, the zeal, as is in our name, it is because we really we started the company, we really wanted to make a difference in patients' lives, using our knowledge and experience along with the amazing science that people like Chad inject into it, right? You combine these things in the right way and, we can have an impact. So.
Yeah, we're fortunate to work in this industry for sure, where we really can have an impact on people's lives in a real tangible way. So yeah, I certainly feel fortunate for that every day.
Yeah, it's also been as I reflect over the years of having to deal with various illnesses myself, working in the industry, at least, or I should say, especially in the U.S. It's been interesting to see the evolution of the sciences and treatment, including diagnostics, right, and care, continue to improve, while at the same time, what I have, experienced and witnessed, and I think is not foreign to many people who may be watching this, is at the same time actually trying to be a patient and get the care and navigate the system, the economics. We're all fortunate. We work in the industry and we understand the industry. And even at that, when you're ill, it's really hard to get what you need, even though it's plentiful out there from the science. And I think there is a need more and more for the patient to get more health as they deal with whatever illness they may be managing. So, and that's, again, it's the cornerstone of our passion and my reason to want to start this company is really because I was experiencing that. And I'm like, it's, I need to try to do something about it, at least as part of my last hurrah, professionally speaking.
Yeah, so I think that kind of leads into one of the topics that we wanted to talk about is with Zealic is the focus on the patient-centric solution. And one of the, I guess I don't really know what you guys are doing. You're, I think of you as a healthcare software company, solution company. So how do you bring that together for the patient-centric solution? Give us some ideas of that. And then maybe also, talk about patient centricity a little bit, because I think you mentioned it, but it's a term that doesn't immediately ring to people. But I hope, because I think it's a really important concept, I hope that talking about it will bring it out, because everybody should feel like the patient is at the center, including our healthcare providers. And that's certainly not always the case.
Yeah. At the core of what we do, I mean, we're a solution provider within the life science space specifically, and it's enabled and fueled by technology, ultimately. Some very, very unique and innovative technology. And first and foremost, and Chad, I know, Greg, you have a medical device background as well. Today, especially in the life science industry, there is a lot of technology that is involved, whether it's in the clinical trial space, in the commercial space, and any patient involved in either in a trial or trying to get treatment and the support to treatment, or get the financial, assistance in that treatment, are faced with a technological overload. Okay. And, your phone is filled with apps, right? How many portals do you have, right? I know I got a lot. And really, the other part of this is in the world of drug development on the commercial side. There's just a large number of treatments out there by small to mid-sized companies. And it's so hard for them. They have an enormous amount of knowledge, as you know, about a disease, right? And about different ways to care for it. but it's so hard for them to be able to get that knowledge out to the patients, and connected with their treatments, because we have regulations that we have to deal with. And if you want to do it in a digital and or interpersonal way, it requires custom creation and a very long and lengthy and expensive process to do this. So the small to mid-size, biopharmas, right, biotechs and pharmas, in some instances, they never are able to do it. It's too costly. It takes too long. It's too hard. They're too busy with trying to, well, frankly, do everything else to get the drug out into the market. And what we did is, if any of you or the readers know Shopify, right? I mean, e-commerce started as custom building stores out on the internet, and every store was custom built, right? Software developers had to do all of this, and Shopify was smart enough to create a point and click way of being able to accomplish it fast, easy, flexible, to accommodate all different types of stores. We did the exact same thing for patient engagement, patient support, HCP or doctor support interactions, so that you get rid of customizing. You accelerate the time to do it by up to 75%. You deburden the organization that's trying to focus on the science and the interactive patient support from having to deal with getting a fully omni-channel alternate solution into the market. Instead, we just design it, we get all the content, point, click, boom, boom, submit it for regulatory review at a press of a button. And as such, ultimately, we enable more support, richer support, greater personalization for the patient when they are working through a very, difficult and emotionally challenging time. And that's ultimately what we've done. So it's used in many different ways. It's education, access, and affordability on the commercial side, like after the drug is launched, not where we're used to clinical trials, but also clinical trials. Patients are burdened by trials these days, especially when they have some virtual visits, and it's designed to accommodate that as well. And so ultimately, we're making it easier for life science to bridge the gap between their knowledge and expertise, treatment and support, and the patient.
Nice. And you mentioned earlier, we all have stories that got us into, and that drive us. And I think those are some of the biggest motivations. Because, for me, my dad had melanoma that metastasized in his brain, and I was searching for, clinical trials for him. And that's kind of what, got me initially into the industry, and I made a career of it from there. But there's another story, and Chad pointed this out to me earlier that I didn't know previously, that you have Ukrainian employees, and which is partly why you're in Poland right now. Tell us about that story, kind of pre and post the breakout of the war, and how that's kind of affected your mission and how you've tried to help.
Yes, that is correct, and we do. We have actually a fairly diverse collection of employees from many different parts of the world, interestingly enough. But they were at the time, before the war, co-located in Lviv, Ukraine, as well as our U.S. center, which is in the Raleigh-Durham area. And the story of how, many people say, well, how did you end up in Ukraine, right? It is not like, it's not a common place for many companies to reach out and do that. It happens to go back to a individual I met when I was the CEO of eTrials, an eClinical company, who he was providing software services out of Ukraine, small company. His name is Igor Krukliak. And over the years, Igor and I worked together at many different companies, and we got to get to know each other and become, professional friends. And ultimately, long story short, when I started the company, I told him, Igor, I want to partner up with you. And that got me into the country, in the sense that we were continuing to use staff out of there. We built our team there, as well, and had an office there. Actually, interestingly enough, the office was in a 100-year-old large Austrian apartment with very, very thick walls. You'll understand why this is meaningful in a second. It had a beautiful kitchen there. Actually had a jacuzzi in the bathroom. It was kind of funny, but we worked out of there, and I would visit very often. And then leading up to when before the invasion occurred, I established for my people there what was referred to as Plan B. And what we did is we, first and foremost, I, told them that I am prepared to set up a company in Poland. This is actually my third business. And, that I wanted to do it. I'm going to do that and invite them all to come to Poland as a safety period. That was Plan B, because it was looking just too close for comfort that Russia may actually do what they did, and as such, we ended up inviting people to come, bring their families here, and set up shop. And if everything smoothed out, go home. Right? This is your home. We understand that for sure. However, if you'd be more comfortable, come here, call it a work vacation. That's fine. And that's what we ended up doing. And we relocated those who wanted to come here. We got them set up. We helped them. I set up the company because I didn't know whether, would Poland allow them to stay longer than 90 days? If it lasted longer, if I had a company, I could legalize them. They could call it home if they needed. And so that's what we ended up doing. And that produced, I could sit here and tell you story after story. Even literally, I had two women coming over the day the war broke out. One woman, I accelerated her departure to a few days earlier. Not that I knew anything. I was just going to be here. She moved. She came here, and she was fine. But the other woman was in the airport when the first missile hit, and so she was stuck, and she couldn't get out.
Wow.
And these are the stories I can go on and on about, especially after the first 30 days of trying to help everybody work through this very, very traumatic and difficult situation.
So intense.
So once we got everybody who wanted to here, there was another experience that was added that I didn't again anticipate. These people have their family members in some instances and closer to the border of Russia, and they're stuck in bunkers, right? And they can't get out. They can't, they have no place to live if they do. And these are our team members' families. And so what we did is we very quickly turned our very safe, thick-walled Austrian, bunker, our office, into a hotel. And then we had them all come, as many as wanted, and we allowed them to stay there for 6 months in our office, because again, it had a kitchen, it had bathroom, it had all provisions. And in some instances, it may have been just a husband. In some instances, it was a husband, wife, and child. Some people stayed longer. Some people left. Other people came. Whatever it took, we really wanted to take care of our people and their families as best we can during this time. And so anyway, that's a fraction of the story.
That's remarkable. And from what I understand, Poland's been very accommodating to anyone coming in to take some refuge.
It has. Yeah, absolutely. So, and, it's, people have, made, this area their home now. And so, everything is as best as it can be. We all hope it'll end soon, and people can choose in their lives as to what they want to do, stay, go back, and we'll accommodate.
Wow. Yeah.
So want to talk a little bit more. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Chad.
I was just going to say, hopefully, in the near future, things get resolved, but it's quite a quagmire. So it's going to take some time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is indeed. And I do want to talk a little bit more about Zealic. But before we do, it's time to introduce our first segment of New News.
New news.
New news. LDTs, laboratory developed tests, have become a topic of hot debate this year since the FDA announced on April 29th that LDTs, which were primarily regulated by CLIA, would now be under the same full regulatory scrutiny as medical devices. This ruling went into effect in May 6th, and there will be a 4-year kind of phase-out period. The FDA argues that there's too much risk involved now in the variability in the tests, and ensuring their quality and consistency is important to them. So they're worried that these tests could harm the patients with misdiagnoses. They also shared earlier frustration with Congress for not passing legislation to clarify the regulatory framework for the tests themselves. The consequences of this ruling, however, are hitting the laboratory industry pretty hard. It will take longer to get tests approved. The cost of creating LDTs will increase enormously going through this longer regulatory process. Some smaller labs may even opt to scrap certain tests just because they can't afford the process at this time. It will likely slow down innovation as well for novel diagnostic tests for unmet medical needs, including cancer patients exploring their last chance for experimental treatments. And now Congress is pushing back. On July 15th, the House Appropriations Committee agreed to fund the FDA $3.5 billion for 2025 in a narrow vote, but asked the FDA to suspend its final ruling on LDTs and said that the ruling carries, and I quote, the risk of greatly altering the United States laboratory testing infrastructure and reducing patient access to information that informs their healthcare decision making. So, Chuck, how do you respond to this? What do you make of this? And in your opinion, is the FDA overreacting to safety concerns?
Well, I don't have enough data to know whether they're overreacting or not, to be perfectly honest with you, for these tests, because I don't know how many, or how much it is adversely affecting patients in any possible way. I think the probably the bigger challenge in the fact that things like these type of changes occur is the clarity of guidance around what is expected, because that in my experiences, and I've personally had to stand in front of the FDA for 10 years as running a medical device team. And the biggest challenge is the interpretation of these rules. And the more vague and uncertain, especially in this instance, as you've described it, well, that's definitely going to play somewhat of a havoc to the companies trying to deal with it. And I suspect these companies anybody who plays in the life science or healthcare space, devices, diagnostics, treatments, whatever it is, they understand and respect the importance of safety, right? By virtue of them being in the industry. The burden, like I said, is going to become more the interpretation of it, and then how I operate, in developing these tests and administering these tests with these new laws.
Yeah, so for me, this has been interesting because, typically I'm not in favor of what Congress is doing, but in this case, I think asking to take a step back makes a lot of sense, and it feels like what happened here is the FDA felt that there was an issue with lab developed tests, and they wanted to do something fast to just plug a hole, right? And that while I respect that, right, like let's try and take care of this quickly. At the same time, there's so many other things the FDA has done that have been quite slow, and they have a process for new rules and new approaches. And I think if there was an issue with lab developed tests, with these unique tests, let's write a rule that's for lab developed tests and not try to apply a rule that already exists to them that's written for a different purpose for medical devices. And so make the rule that fixes it, that receives commentary and takes time and isn't kind of shoved in there, because I've been to many running a testing lab. I've been to many discussions and webinars and things on this, and trying to understand how we're going to navigate the space is just it's just been confusing. I've sort of, I don't want to say I've given up understanding it, but I've certainly said to my team, you guys need to understand this stuff. I've been to too many webinars. So
Right.
luckily I'm in a spot where I can do that, but it's just
Right.
gotten to be where it's overwhelming. And so pulling back from that a little bit is very welcome for me. But at the same time, I welcome the FDA coming with, let's talk about a way to solve the problem. Let's identify what the problem is, and let's find a way to solve it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is just one area that we're going to see this popping up more and more with the innovation in technology,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's in treatment and, gene and cell therapy or, or the whole thing of AI, right? And the use of AI for the purposes of healthcare in different ways. I mean, we already hear it, right? I mean, you already hear the concerns associated with how it's going to be applied. So I think having the FDA and can navigate these things, respecting the fact that they don't interrupt the valuable treatments that are being developed and are trying to get into the hands of needed patients, and don't overreact to that. And frankly, as they do, I know, engaging industry experts like yourself to help figure this stuff out.
Right.
I think we'll
right.
at least we'll be able to navigate that delicate balance between safety and effectiveness and availability.
Yeah, because the FDA is an impossible task. It's almost impossible, and they're trying to protect us, right? So I respect that. They're trying to protect our health, and at the same time, they do want to encourage innovation. We talked about that quite a bit on this podcast about that challenge of innovating but protecting safety in such an important industry for our for our whole planet, really. So
yeah.
I think it's so difficult to navigate that continuum, and where do you go? And it's different for every patient's journey. For some patients, it may make sense to be err on the side of caution. But if you're a cancer patient and you don't have any other options, you're willing to roll the dice on probably anything, and you don't want to be held back by some type of a ruling.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
How do you? I'm kind of curious how you guys see, how the whole implications in healthcare and regulations are as it applies to some, the AI event that is occurring here these days.
Well, I mean, the FDA they've talked a lot about it. I went to MedCon in April, and Jeff Shuren, who's the director of CDRH, he talked about that. And there's been a lot of approvals that have come out, and there's, I think, quite a few people reviewing that. But I think it's very difficult for them to keep up with the speed of AI and the things that are happening. So we'll see how much that. He gave the impression that they're really doing a pretty good job keeping up with the needs and demands and making sure those new technologies, if they're safe, that they get approved.
Yeah.
It's been. No, I was going to say, it's been interesting as I've been looking at different IT solutions, or there's nothing out there that doesn't have the word AI on it. If it's IT, the people are slapping AI on it now, and so there is a bit of a challenge to know what is AI, what is something that was really already there, and they slapped AI on it, or so it's there's no doubt that it's you got to sort through that before you start asking the AI question even.
Where does marketing end and reality begin?
Right?
I mean, it's funny because I remember when the whole explosion of the cloud started in the IT world, right? It was probably viewed more relative to the technical industry than the business industry. But still, I was involved in a number of forums where people are trying to understand, what is this thing called the cloud, right? I mean, they're really very, very confused, and what does it mean? But everybody had a cloud in their logo, right? It was like all over the place. And, it's deja vu, right? I mean, it's a repeat. But I've attended some conferences where, there are some panel discussions about it. And And, I think that what I have been seeing is a bit of a confusion between, like a WebMD type, where AI may be feeding advice to the general population, and the use of, like, one of the individuals actually out of one of the universities was developing the next generation of CAD, computer-aided detection, for digital mammography images, but next generation because it's using AI. And there is a regulated, controlled process for which those using it for CAD are going through, no different than the process that you go through in building, like, an MRI machine. But yet, because everybody is seeing what's happening in the general population, they're like, well, yeah, but I want to see the data that the model is being built against to know before you use whatever your CAD system is on me. And I'm like, but you don't question the MRI machine.
Right.
And it has a
Right.
high degree of intelligence in what it's doing and how it's being used, all based on software algorithms. No one ever challenged that. Why are we questioning how we use AI for the purposes of aiding medical experts to make better diagnostic decisions? Let's let the process build a safe solution. And I believe that we'll end up with a better outcome. And I also think, people don't realize that AI isn't going to say, no, we don't need the doctor, just use AI, right? And this is the other fallacy, that people who don't understand our industry realize that's never going to happen. But It could help that doctor and their expertise and knowledge, or any other clinician or drug developer, in trying to predict the probability of a drug outcome before it goes through trials. I mean, those things are very real, and they will be incredibly beneficial to our industry.
Yeah, I've seen a few examples lately in different spaces with diagnostic, where maybe the doctor would order, I'll say the doctor would order 10 tests. And, when you use these predictive tools, it says 5 tests, and putting it through our algorithm will actually do a better job of diagnosing than the physician will, looking at data from 10 tests. But as soon as you're the physician overseeing that, who doesn't, as soon as there's a miss, right? One might be 95% and one might be 80%. But the problem is, as soon as you automate it, if you're, that 5%, if you didn't order those other 5 tests, you're all of a sudden, you've got a lawsuit. It's like a self-driving car, right? Self-driving cars are probably overall safer, but you hear all the news about the the one accident that happens, right? And that's and so we'll get there slowly. Self-driving cars will get there slowly, using AI and diagnostics with physician oversight, like you say. I mean, I totally agree with that. It's going to get there, but and it needs to get there, right? We need it as an enabler in our job. The people who are out of their jobs won't be the ones using AI. The people who are out of their jobs will be the ones who don't.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think. Go ahead, no, please.
Yeah, no, it does bring up a couple things, and I think the mitigating factors are, I think, too many people who've watched movies like The Terminator, and so they just fear anything that might be overly automated. And as you mentioned before, AI is such a catch phrase. It's this huge umbrella, and there's a lot of things that fit underneath it. Is it automation? Is it machine learning? Is it language prediction? It's, there's all these different things that people are, like you mentioned, there's a tiny bit of automation, so it's AI, but it's not the type of AI that's, maybe like ChatGPT that we're thinking of or getting used to. So I agree. I think it really can help, because the whole promise of AI is taking massive amounts of data and finding those patterns and helping you get to the solution faster.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that whether it's in the medical world, or I kind of reflect on it, a little closer to home within my company, even in the software development world, using AI to accelerate the creation of, pragmatic innovation in our products, all right, is something like we are doing. But it's not saying we're not going to have software developers. And actually what it ends up doing is it elevates their level of expertise from coding to development to engineering, because they don't have to write the gory code and the probability of them. But if they tell AI what it is the code needs to do, the predictability of the outcome is much greater. The number of issues that occur is much less. The probability of it functioning consistently is much better. And they have to pay more attention to what it is software has to do and not worry about how the software is going to do it by being coders. And, I think as long as people working in this space still respect the expertise associated with AI that still will exist, well, I don't know how long, right? Will it take over the world? Yeah, I doubt it, but I think for it to really maximize the benefit of many industries, if it's embraced that way, it will be extremely effective. Yeah. And back to the regulatory, if I may, the regulatory point you brought up earlier, I mentioned, in the commercial side for our listeners here, to take information from a pharmaceutical company and to convey it out to patients and doctors and caregivers and such, right? As you guys probably know, you have to go through this regulatory process called medical, legal, and regulatory review. And you're using incredibly intelligent people, doctors, lawyers, right, regulatory experts reviewing all this content to be certain it doesn't violate other patents, claims that are made about the drug that have been approved by the FDA. And these experts, this is not something that it's distracting them from focusing on the patient, on the treatments, on the development of drugs. And so, one of the little things we've done is we're going to automate, like CAD, computer-aided detection, automate areas within the content to emphasize to the reviewer so they don't have to read every word. They could just focus on areas that have a likely violation against the rules that they are in fact looking for, and they can focus on making the final decision. I could be looking at 1,000 pages and all they do is look at 5 of them because the rest of it is irrelevant to patents and claims and all of that, to accelerate getting knowledge in the hands of patients and not distracting the experts from focusing on the patient.